The Last Carol at Willow Street, a bedtime story, a sleep story, a relaxing story, gently woven into a guided sleep meditation. That is where every echo of the final Christmas night still drifts between the old rooftops and the ancient willow boughs. This is Evelyn Blackwood, and you're listening to Midnight Murmurs Radio, where old whispers guide you far away from the noise of the world. Tonight, I invite you to step into Willow Street, where there is a carol that was never finished and never fully silent. Before the story unfolds, I want you to lie down comfortably. Let your body sink into the mattress beneath you. Breathe in slowly and exhale softly. Close your eyes. Allow your shoulders to loosen like old wooden doors, gently opening in the wind. And let your breath guide you away from all the worries that no longer belong to this moment. Imagine stepping into a safe, quiet place where it's only you, your steady breathing, and the warm flicker of a single candle glowing at the far end of the room. Now, let us begin. That night on Willow Street was covered in a thin veil of mist, stretched across the old cobblestones like a sheet of white silk. The wind drifted softly, brushing the wooden eaves and the oil lantern hanging in front of house No. 112. An old home from the late 19th century, once belonging to a Scottish immigrant family who sang carols every holiday season. But 'tis year. The lantern outside was dark. The front door stood slightly ajar, as if protecting a long-held secret, and in the air lingered something faint, like the unfinished echo of a song left hanging in the cold. I stood at the end of the street, my coat damp with the mist, and felt that tonight Willow Street intended to tell me its story, not through words, but through memories preserved in every wooden fiber of its walls. Willow Street had long been a home to immigrant laborers who built their first American dreams in the late 1800s. Children once played beside frozen gutters, mothers baked bread in narrow kitchens, and fathers came home from brick factories with soot and fire oil on their coats. Yet this same place had witnessed harsh winters, silent injustices, and songs swallowed by the wind when someone was forced to leave their home in quiet sorrow. And among all those stories, House No. 112 stood apart. Take a yed, it, the house of the last carol, because on Christmas Eve of 1894, the Campbell family began singing a carol and never finished it. No one knew what happened afterward. Some said a strange, unseasonal blizzard swallowed Willow Street for 3 days, and when the snow melted, the house was empty. But, strangely, every winter, if you stand across the street at just the right moment when the wind shifts, you may hear a distant voice humming the sorrowful fragment of a carol, as though someone is still trying to complete the abandoned last line. As I stepped closer to the old door, it opened with a gentle creak. No one inside, only air slightly warmer than the outside, as though the house still remembered human presence. Cinnamon and pine resin lingered in the living room, and at the center of the faded wooden floor stood an upright piano with its lid slightly lifted, one ivory key raised as if it had just been touched. I walked slowly, my breath blending into the soft stillness. The wall mirror reflected the dim street lamp glow, but when I approached, for a brief, fleeting second, I saw the silhouette of a woman seated at the piano, hair tied in an old Scottish style, posture gently tilted, and then she vanished like fine dust in the wind. The feeling wasn't frightening, only cool enough to raise a subtle shiver, the kind you get when listening to an ancient story and realizing it might be listening back. Beside the piano lay a music book, its pages browned with age, the title faint, The Last Carol. The music notes stretched only halfway across the page, and a stop. No ending. No lyrics. No sign of why the piece had been left unfinished. And when I touched the fragile corner of the page, a soft breeze brushed past me, carrying the whisper of a young girl practicing a single, drawn-out note, almost reaching a transition that never came. Willow Street, House No. 112. And the carol without an ending. Tonight, I knew I wasn't here just to listen. I was here to witness the fragments of memory trying to return. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The warmth inside House No. 112 felt strangely alive, as if the walls themselves exhaled in long, quiet sighs each time I moved, and the faint glow drifting from somewhere deeper in the hallway guided me like the soft pulse of a lantern hidden behind memory. I followed it with slow steps, each footfall a gentle thud against century-old floorboards that responded with delicate creaks, not as warnings, but as acknowledgments, like the house was aware of my presence and not opposed to it, only curious, almost relieved, as though waiting for someone willing to listen after so many winters gone unheard. The air thickened with the scent of pine and candle soot, and from behind a half-open door came a thin shimmer of light accompanied by a faint melodic hum, the kind that flickers on the edge of reality, a note you're not sure you've heard or imagined, so quiet it feels like it's being sung from the other side of a dream. When I pushed the door gently with the tip of my fingers, it swung inward without resistance, revealing what must have once been the Campbell family's parlor, all draped in soft shadows, the furniture covered in a delicate layer of frost dust that sparkled under the wavering, amber glow of a single candle perched atop a wooden mantel. Though no flame burned, the candle emitted a light that pulsed softly, impossibly, like the echo of a flame rather than the flame itself, as if the house preserved the memory of every holiday it once held, refusing to let the warmth die, even when the people who lit the candles were gone. A rocking chair sat in the corner, positioned just so, facing an old framed photograph hung askew above the fireplace. The photo showed the Campbell family father, mother, two daughters standing in front of a snowy Willow Street, their expressions gentle but strangely solemn, as took they be known that the night the photograph was taken was already the beginning of an ending. I took a step closer, breath quiet, and the rocking chair moved just once forward and back, the motion so slight and so slow that it didn't startle me, but rather eased into the room like a memory stretching its limbs after a long sleep. I whispered a soft greeting without fully knowing why, perhaps out of instinct or out of respect for the remnants of lives that still lingered there, and the chair gradually stilled, as if acknowledging the gesture. The humming returned, then barely a thread of sound coming from the staircase that spiraled upward with narrow steps worn smooth by the feet of generations. The melody seemed older than the house itself, thin and trembling but unmistakably the same unresolved note from the last carol, held for just a moment before dissolving into silence. I followed it upward, one step at a time, my hand grazing the railing where the varnish had long faded, leaving only the warm touch of wood that had absorbed years of laughter, footsteps, and secrets. As I climbed, the temperature shifted subtly, warmer near the top, carrying an almost festive aroma of cloves and winter apples, a scent that felt impossibly fresh for a house uninhabited for more than a century. At the landing, a hallway stretched ahead, lined with closed doors, but the second door on the right had a soft golden glow leaking from underneath, flickering like candlelight caught in a gentle breeze. As I approached, the humming grew clearer, still fragile, but unmistakably a young girl's voice. I opened the door slowly, and inside was a bedroom preserved as though the world outside had never changed. A small iron bed draped in a woolen tartan blanket, a window frosted with thin crystalline patterns shaped like branching ferns, and atop a small writing desk lay scattered sheets of music handwritten, delicate, each marked with notes that curled across the page like they were still searching for their final line. In front of the desk, facing the window, stood the faint outline of a figure, translucent, still, her posture suggesting deep concentration, as she leaned slightly forward, as though listening to something beyond the cold night. Her hair was tied in a loose ribbon, and the hem of her dress wavered like light reflected off water. The moment I entered, she did not turn, but the humming stopped, replaced by a silence that felt aware, watchful, and oddly gentle. "Is that your song?" I whispered, not expecting an answer, but feeling that the question needed to be asked. And though she made no motion, a soft rustle filled the room, the sound of pages shifting on the desk, even though no wind touched them. The unfinished sheet at the top fluttered once, and the last written note glowed faintly as though warming itself in the candle memory light drifting through the house. It was then I understood. She wasn't haunting the house. She was waiting for her carol to find its ending, and I, somehow, had stepped into the night when the house decided to try again. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The air in the room felt suspended in a soft stillness, as though every particle of dust, every lingering trace of breath from years long past, had paused just to listen. The faint silhouette of the girl remained near the desk, her form wavering gently like a reflection on rippling water, not threatening, not sorrowful, only patient, as though she had been waiting far longer than any living soul could comprehend, waiting for someone who might finally hear what she could no longer say aloud. The candle memory glow that filled the bedroom deepened into a warmer amber, brushing the edges of the quilted blanket, the frost-laced window, and the delicate handwriting scattered across the sheets of unfinished music. And I could feel if the house had begun guiding me, nudging me closer, not with force, but with a quiet invitation, encouraging me to step into the story it had held so carefully for over a century. I moved toward the desk, each step slow, letting the hush of the room settle around me, and the girl's outline shimmered with a faint pulse that rose and fell like a soft exhale, an echo of life that had not entirely faded. When I reached the desk, the pages shifted again, this time turning themselves as though invisible fingers traced the edges, revealing more notes, more lines, More attempts at completing the melody that had been left incomplete on that long ago Christmas Eve. Some pages were stained with water, perhaps melted snow, perhaps tears, and others were smudged by hurried pencil marks, crossed out and rewritten in a frantic swirl that spoke of someone desperate, someone in a rush, someone aware that time was slipping away. Behind me, the floorboards sighed in a long, low creak, the familiar sound of a parent's step approaching a child's room late at night, gentle and measured. I turned just enough to see the faintest shape of an older figure in the doorway, barely more than a distortion of light, but unmistakably the presence of someone watching over the girl, a mother, perhaps. Her silhouette framed by the soft amber glow that clung to the walls, like the warmth of a memory, refusing to die. She didn't move toward the child, nor toward me. She only stood a quiet witness, her outline trembling as though held together by the thinnest threads of longing. And the longer I looked, the more I sensed a profound ache in the air, an unresolved sorrow that bound these two figures to this moment in time. The girl at the desk raised her head slightly, not turning fully, but enough for me to see the faint curve of her cheek, the outline of her jaw, delicate and young, frozen in an age that should have long passed. And in the silence that followed, she lifted her hand in a small, tremulous motion and pointed toward the frost-covered window. I followed her gesture, drawn into the shimmering patterns etched across the glass, and as I approached, the frost began to shift, lines forming and rearranging themselves with a whisper-like crackle, threading into shapes that resembled words, tinny, glimmering, fragile. At first the letters were indistinct, like half-remembered whispers, but slowly they grew sharper, merging into a line carved in ice. December 24th, 1894, the night the storm came. A chill passed through me, not of fear, but of realization, and as if sensing the moment, the frost continued carving its silent message. We didn't finish the carol because we didn't have time. Behind me, the child's outline flickered, dimming for a heartbeat before brightening again, as though revealing this memory cost her something, a strain on whatever gentle energy held her in place. The mother's presence in the doorway wavered too, shifting like candlelight on the edge of being extinguished. I reached out to the window, letting my fingertips hover just above the crystalline words, and the frost beneath them pulsed faintly, sending a soft wave of cold through my hand. Not painful, but grounding, almost like a hand clasping mine in quiet urgency. Outside, Willow Street lay still beneath its haze of memory myth, but through the frost's shifting patterns I could see silhouettes moving shadowy, figures hurrying through a blizzard that had not touched this world in over a century, their outlines distorted by swirling white, their voices muted except for the faintest fragments. Pleas, warnings, hurried goodbyes carried by wind that had never truly settled. The girl at the desk hummed, then one soft, trembling note, and the shadows outside froze mid-stride as though listening. The mother trembled in the doorway, light crackling softly around her silhouette, and the entire house seemed to lean forward, its beams creaking with the weight of remembered fear. The note faded, and for the first time, the girl turned toward me fully. Her face was gentle, pale, shimmering like moonlit breath, her eyes holding a quiet, ancient pleading. She reached toward the sheet of music on the desk and placed her translucent hand upon the final blank line, the place where the last note should have been. Primera, haunt, or stood. The storm had taken their chance to finish the carol, and the house, the family, the lingering memory of that night, all of it had been waiting for someone who might help complete what could not be finished. A soft wind brushed past me, carrying the faint scent of pine, candlelight, and winter air, and the girl's figure flickered once more, her form loosening like a sigh. She had shown me the truth she could not speak. Now, the rest was up to me. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The silence in the room deepened into something tender, almost protective, as if the house itself feared letting the memory slip away before I could understand the fullness of what it needed to reveal. The girl's translucent hand still rested upon the unfinished line of music, her form shimmering faintly like a soft reflection trembling over candlelit water, and the mother's outline lingered in the doorway dim, wavering, bound by some invisible thread woven from longing, fear, and a promise that had never been completed. The air grew warmer, carrying the faint scent of beeswax and evergreen wreaths, and the candle memory glow brightened just enough to reveal new details. A child's wool scarf draped over the back of the chair, embroidered stockings pinned to the fireplace mantel with old brass clips, and on the floor, partly hidden beneath the bed frame, a wooden music box shaped like a snowflake. I knelt slowly, feeling the floorboard beneath my palm pulse with a long, mellow creak, and reached for the music box. The moment my fingers brushed its cold wooden surface, a gentle hum vibrated through it, so soft it could have been imagined, but steady enough to suggest the box was not entirely silent, not entirely dormant. I lifted it carefully into my hands, and the girl's silhouette shifted, watching me with the kind of stillness that felt ancient yet hopeful. The box was intricately carved, each flake of its wooden snow etched with delicate loops and swirls like the patterns of frost on the window. I turned the small metal key beneath it, half expecting it not to move after more than a century, but it turned smoothly, almost too smoothly, as though someone had wound it only moments before. When I released it, the first note shimmed a soft, trembling tone that echoed through the room like a drop of warm light falling into still water. It was unmistakably part of the carol, the same melody the girl had hummed, the same incomplete line frozen in the sheet music, the same echo drifting through the walls of house snow. 112 every winter since the night the storm came, but after 3 notes, the melody halted abruptly, as if something were missing, a gear in the mechanism turning into empty air, where another piece should have been. The girl's figure drifted closer, her presence sending a faint ripple through the candle memory glow. She lifted her hand toward the music box and paused, her outline trembling in the dim amber light, and I sensed she wanted me to see something more. I turned the box over in my hands, brushing away the thin dust that clung to its surface, and noticed a tiny engraved symbol on the underside, 2 intertwined willow branches curving into a circle. Beneath them, barely visible, for Annalise finished the song. When it's time, the name hit the air like a soft bell, and the girl Annalise shimmered brightly for a moment, the edges of her form glowing as though illuminated by something deep within her memory. She moved toward the frost-patterned window and touched her hand against the glass. The frost responded instantly, swirling outward into new shapes. Scenes formed from ice and light. I stepped closer, watching the shifting images. A family gathered around the piano on a peaceful Christmas Eve. The father's voice deep and steady as he guided his daughters through the carol's familiar verses. The mother smiling gently as she hung garlands along the windows. Annalise at the piano bench, legs too short to reach the floor, humming with earnest concentration as she practiced the final line. But then the frost scene shifted, winds howled. Snow swirled violently around the house, shutters slammed open as the storm rose without warning, and the family hurried to secure the doors. Through the icy vision, I saw it clearly. The father, reaching for the lantern outside, its flame flickering wildly in the wind. The mother pulling Annalise and her sister close. And then, suddenly, the lantern light went out, swallowed by a wave of impossible, blinding white. The window rattled beneath Annalise's ghostly touch, and the frost scene dissolved into mist, leaving only her small silhouette trembling faintly in the dim glow. Her mother's outline flickered in the doorway, leaning forward with the posture of someone yearning to cross a barrier she no longer could. A soft hum drifted through the room, Annalise's voice, holding the final note just a little longer than before, stretching it gently like she was offering it to me, asking me to carry it somewhere she could not go. Behind me, the music box vibrated faintly in my hands, its gears trembling as though it too longed to complete the carol. I realized then that the storm had not just stopped the family from finishing their song. It had trapped the melody itself, binding it to this house, to these memories, to this night that kept replaying in fragile echoes. The house wanted the carol restored. Annalise wanted the carol restored. There was still something hidden, something missing, something buried beneath the years, like a final note waiting in breathless silence. The air shifted around me, warm, pulsing, expectant, and Annalise's voice faded into a whisper thin as the edge of snowfall. She was trusting me with the next step. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The weight of the music box in my hands felt different. Now warmer, almost a vivace. If the tiny wooden snowflake held within it the pulse of a memory waiting to be awakened after more than a century of silence. Annalise's faint outline hovered near the frostless window, her small figure dimming and brightening like a flicker caught between worlds, and the air around her shimmered with a soft silver glow that deepened whenever the unfinished melody brushed against the walls of the room. The mother's silhouette stayed in the doorway, trembling in a quiet rhythm, her presence fragile yet unwavering, held in place by something stronger than time, stronger than fear. I set the music box gently upon the desk beside the scattered pages of sheet music, and immediately the candle memory glow brightened, spreading across the wood like a warm tide, illuminating the final blank line where the last note should have lived. The frost on the window stirred restlessly, its crystalline filigree crawling outward in delicate tendrils, responding to the shift in the room as though the entire house had inhaled and held its breath. Annalise turned toward me then, her translucent eyes glimmering with a softness that felt impossibly human, impossibly present. She lifted her hand and pointed toward the hallway outside the room, the long dim corridor lined with closed doors. I felt the pull instantly, a gentle tug at the edges of my awareness, as though the house had chosen the next memory it wished me to uncover. I stepped back from the desk, the floorboards murmuring beneath my feet in long creaks that felt more like whispers than noises. And as I moved into the hallway, the temperature shifted, scented with old cedar, winter cloth, and the faintest trace of pipe tobacco, a scent that lingered like a ghost of the father's presence. The second door on the left emitted a faint bluish glow beneath its threshold, colder and sharper than the warm amber light in Annalise's room. When I reached for the doorknob, the air hummed with quiet anticipation, a low vibration that resonated in my chest like the first deep note of a cello. The door opened with a soft sigh, revealing what must have been the father's study. Shelves lined with leather-bound journals, a sturdy oak desk cluttered with ink bottles and yellowed papers, and on the far wall, a tall arched window rimmed with frost that shimmered like thin lace. The bluish glow came from a lantern resting on the desk, glass cracked but still emitting a steady ghost-like light, as though a flame long extinguished continued burning in memory alone. I approached the lantern, and as I did, the journals on the shelves rustled softly, their pages fluttering like birds shifting wings in sleep. One journal fell open on its own, landing atop the desk with a muted thump. Inked across the exposed page was the father's handwriting, precise, elegant, but hurried in places where the pen had pressed too hard. December 23rd, 1894. The entry began. The ink faded but readable. The storm worsens by the hour. The girls practiced the carol Agon Analyse, nearly finished the last line. She says the melody feels incomplete unless sung with all of us together. Strain? The house creaked tonight as though something in the walls was breathing along with us. I traced my fingers lightly along the ink, feeling a warmth seep through the page, as if the father's lingering emotion, pride, worry, love still clung to the words. Another page flipped itself over. December 24th, 1894. Morning. The wind howled louder than Aibe ever heard. The lantern outside went out twice. I fear something in this storm is not natural, as if it carries the weight of something older, something watching. My breath slowed. The bluish light of the lantern grew brighter, casting long ribbons of pale illumination across the walls. And in its glow, I saw faint impressions, handprints on the window, as if children had pressed their palms there long ago. Footprints materializing briefly on the floorboards before fading into the shadows. The outline of a coat hanging on a hook, swaying gently, though there was no breeze. I opened another journal. If the storm does not come by nightfall, we must stay inside. The girls are afraid. I tried to lighten the mood with a carol, but Annalise insists. She hears someone humming along a voice she cannot place. A soft chime rang through the room, the music box from Annalise's bedroom, though I had left it behind. The sound floated down the hallway like a warm breath carried on winter wind, its trembling three-note melody echoing between the walls. The lantern's bluish glow flickered, brightened, then steadied as though aligning itself with the distant music. I closed the journal gently and whispered into the quiet. You heard it too, didn't you? The air responded with a soft pulse of warmth, the lantern's light swelling. I felt it tender father's presence. Not fully formed, not like the mother or Annalise, but a steady awareness woven into the very grain of the house, watching, waiting, wanting me to understand what happened the night the storm came. Behind me, the frost began to spread across the arched window, forming new words that glimmered in the lantern light. This storm took more than warmth, it took our voices. The room dimmed, the lantern flickering faintly, and the house settled into a profound hush. Somewhere down the hallway, Annalise hummed a single fragile note, the next piece of the truth. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Evelyn's voice slips back into the quiet winter air, deep and velvety, as if she has been standing with you all along on the dimly lit stretch of Willow Street. Her presence, soft as candle smoke, drifting through an old Victorian parlor. And the moment you lean into the sound of her whisper, the world around you begins to settle again. The night rearranging itself into something calmer, dreamlike, yet threaded with the faintest shiver of the unknown that seems to breathe beneath the frost-kissed rooftops of this forgotten corner of town where the last carolers once walked. And as you take a slow breath, letting your chest rise and fall gently, you feel the snowy silence press close, warm and protective despite its wintry chill, like a guardian looking over your drifting thoughts, while Evelyn guides you deeper into the memory she is weaving, a memory older than the brick houses and the gas lamps glowing pale against the December mist, a memory that moves with the quiet patience of history. She leads you down the narrow street where each window glimmers with faint golden light, but some windows just a few carry a subtle flicker that feels slightly off rhythm, as though a candle burns there not for decoration but for remembrance. And when the wind shifts, you hear what might be the distant echo of a child's voice humming a Christmas tune long abandoned by time. A melody that wavers at the edge of understanding like a half-forgotten lullaby carried across generations. You follow it, slowly, your footsteps muffled by the snow, your breath turning into soft clouds that drift upward and disappear into the night, like tiny ghosts of warmth, dissolving into the cold. Evelyn continues in that unbroken midnight whisper, saying that Willow Street has always been gentle, always been peaceful, yet steeped in a kind of history that clings to the rafters of its oldest home stories of immigrant families celebrating their first American Christmas with hope and trembling uncertainty. Tales of neighbors who once gathered on porches to sing carols under lantern light. Stories of wars that took sons away and left candles burning in windows for years after the news arrived. And sometimes, if the December air is quiet enough, those memories return in soft fragments, drifting along the street like snowflakes, searching for a place to land, brushing against anyone who walks with an open heart. The humming grows clearer as you approach a house with a wide bay window and peeling white trim, a house that seems perfectly ordinary at first glance, yet carries an aura of being gently suspended in time. As if the night has slowed its breath around it, you pause, your senses heightening as the melody shifts into something tender, fragile, almost pleading, and Evelyn's voice lowers even more, drawing you closer, encouraging you not to fear the subtle stirrings of the past, for they are only echoes, and echoes, she reminds, youth cannot harm youth, can only ask to be heard. A faint shimmer glows inside the window, not electric, not candlelight, but something softer, almost like the glow of distant snowfall reflecting off moonlight, even though no such light exists in the room beyond the glass. You take another breath, slow and steady, your body relaxing further with each gentle inhale, as the world becomes a little more dreamlike, edges fading into the hush of midnight. And just as you lean closer, the humming breaks only for a heartbeat and becomes a small, wistful sigh. A breath of sound that stirs something deep within your chest. Something like empathy. Something like longing. And before you can understand why, a warmth spreads through your fingertips as though someone invisible has brushed past you, carrying with them the lingering memory of a Christmas long ago, when this house was filled with carols, laughter, and the clatter of wooden toys on polished floors. Evelyn murmurs that the house belonged to a family called the Merry Way, known for their kindness and their annual caroling, tradition that began in 1892 and continued through snowfall, hardship, and years of unspoken sorrow, until one winter she pauses. The silence, heavy and tender, simply stopped, leaving the last carol unfinished, hanging in the air like a question that has never been answered. And as you stand there, your breath matching the gentle rhythm of Evelyn's voice, you feel the echo of that final carol stirring once more, not frightening, just waiting, patient as the snow, ready to be heard again. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Evelyn returns in a low, velvety whisper, the kind that feels as though it rises from the wooden floorboards of an old parlor rather than from a voice. And as her words unfurl, the night around Willow Street thickens with the soft weight of memory, the air trembling with a calm, almost sacred quiet, as though the town itself is holding its breath. She tells you that dawn never comes quickly here, not in this corner where history lingers longer than daylight, and where the last carol of the Merryweathers has been echoing unfinished for more than a century, drifting like a snowflake suspended in golden lamplight, waiting for a traveler, perhaps you too hear it completely. You breathe slowly, letting the hush of Evelyn's cadence wrap around you like a warm wool blanket, each inhale untangling whatever remnants of the waking world still cling to your shoulders. And as you settle deeper into the snowy stillness of Willow Street, she guides you toward the next moment of the story, a moment woven from the fragile thread between the living and the echoes that remain. She tells you that when you stepped away from the Merryweathers' window, the faint shimmer inside hadn't vanished. It had followed, not in a haunting way, but in a gentle, inquisitive drift, like a memory trying to stay close, hoping to be understood. And as you walked further down the empty street, your footsteps sinking softly into the fresh powder, the glow hovered near your side, faint enough that you could pretend it was only a trick of winter light, yet strong enough that your senses felt its presence with each careful step you took. Willow Street stretched ahead, long and quiet, lined with homes that seemed to doze beneath their coats of snow, roofs sagging slightly under the weight of winter, windows fogged by the warmth of old radiators or fireplaces slowly burning themselves into embers. A dog barked once in the distance low, uncertain then, fell silent again, as though the night reminded it not to disturb the fragile peace. Evelyn's whisper deepened, telling you that the street had not always been this calm. In the early 1900s, Willow Street had been a bustling little world of its own, filled with newspaper boys running between porches, women in long wool coats carrying baskets of oranges or loaves of bread. And every December, the Merryweathers caroling party moving from door to door with lanterns raised high, singing harmonies that melted the cold from the bones of even the loneliest widows who lived at the far end of the road. But on one particular Christmas Eve, the one whispered about in town history, the one only spoken of in hushed fragmenta, carolers reached the bend in the street where a narrow alley split off behind the old post office, and something went wrong. No one remembers exactly what, or perhaps they chose not to remember. But after that night, the caroling stopped forever, and the Merryweathers retreated into silence. Their lanterns extinguished, their music vanished, their tradition broken like a glass ornament dropped onto a hardwood floor. As Evelyn recounts this, her voice is steady yet soft by sympathy, as though she is brushing her fingers along the edges of a wound, careful not to press too deeply. She guides you closer to the bend in the road where the snow seems untouched, smoother than the rest, as if time has been reluctant to step onto this patch of earth. You pause there, feeling the faint glow at your side pulse gently, like a candle reacting to a distant draft. And when the wind shifts, you hear, only for a breath, a fragile chord, 3 notes, rising just slightly before dissolving back into the stillness. And you know instinctively that this was once part of the final Merryweather carol, the one that never reached its last verse. A soft ache blooms in your chest, not sorrowful but deeply human, like recognizing a story you somehow knew long before hearing it. The glow drifts forward, hovering over the snow as if urging you to follow. And Evelyn murmurs that the past has waited long enough, that some memories, once awakened, can no longer remain silent. She guides you down the alley, its entrance framed by 2 brick walls, weathered by more winters than anyone alive can recall. Bricks chipped and darkened, mortars crumbling like old biscuit crumbs under frost. The air here feels somehow denser, quieter, as though even the wind hesitates before entering. And the light from the gas lamps behind you fades into a gentle amber haze, leaving the narrow passage bathed in a dim, bluish glow from the snow above. You take another slow breath, letting the darkness feel safe rather than threatening, letting Evelyn's voice anchor you as she encourages you to step deeper into the forgotten space that once held the weight of a choice, a moment suspended in time. And as the glow leads the way, drifting just ahead of you like a tiny, patient guide, Evelyn whispers that the truth of the last carol begins here, where the echoes never fully faded, where something quiet and powerful still lingers, waiting for someone willing to listen without fear. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The glow drifts deeper into the narrow alley, moving with the slow confidence of something that knows exactly where it is going. And Evelyn's whisper follows closely behind, low and steady, her voice wrapping around you like velvet-lined shadows as she tells you that this place, this forgotten corridor behind the old post office, was once far more than a shortcut between streets. In the winter of 1907, it had been the gathering point for the Merryweathers before they began their Christmas Eve procession, a place filled with the rustle of wool coats, the soft laughter of neighbors, the clink of lantern handles against gloved palms, and the gentle hum of voices warming up their harmonies before stepping into the snowy night. But now, more than a century later, The alley is quiet as a sealed envelope, holding its secrets tightly, the walls rising on either side like silent witnesses carved from brick and frost, and your footsteps echo softly as you follow the drifting shimmer ahead. The air grows colder, not sharply, but with a deep chill that feels ancient, as though it has seeped into the stones from decades of winters layered over each other. And as you breathe out, your exhale lingers longer here, curling upward slow and silver like a ghost reluctant to leave. Evelyn speaks again, her tone soft, telling you that sometimes the spaces people leave behind hold on to the moments they feared to remember or wished not to relive. And the alley behind Willow Street has held on to one moment in particular, a moment that imprinted itself so deeply that even time has been reluctant to erase it. The glow pauses near the corner where the alley bends, pulsing gently, and you approach with cautious calm, your body heavy with relaxation, yet stirred by a quiet curiosity that coils somewhere beneath your ribs. And as you draw close, a faint sound rises, as delicate as the brushing of fingertips across frosted glass. The opening notes of a carol, the same unfinished melody you heard at the Meriwether's window, but now clearer, trembling with the fragile hope of something trying to be whole again. Evelyn's whisper dips lower, telling you that the final carol had always been different from their others written by Eleanor Meriwether herself, a woman known for a voice that made even the most hard-hearted neighbors soften, a woman who believed that music could mend what life had fractured. Her carol was meant to be a gift to the town, a farewell to a difficult year, and a promise of better days. But something happened that night, something that silenced the gift before it could be given, leaving only fragments of melodies suspended in the winter air. As you turn the corner of the alley, the glow brightens, illuminating the frost-covered bricks with a soft pearly sheen, and there on the wall to your left you notice a faint carving, nearly erased by time. Initials, intertwined letters shaped with care, perhaps carved by someone waiting in the cold many years ago. You brush your fingertips lightly near the stone, not touching but sensing the memory beneath it, and Evelyn murmurs that Eleanor Meriwether once stopped here with someone she loved. Someone whose name never made it into the town's tidy historical records. Someone whose absence that night shaped everything that followed. The three notes of the carol drift through the alley again, a fragile compass guiding you deeper, and the glow pulls you forward until it halts in front of an old wooden door, half sunken into the brick wall. Its paint peeled and its hinges rusted, a door that looks as though it has not been opened in decades, yet beneath its weathered surface you sense warmth, like the faint heat of a memory still burning behind a closed curtain. Evelyn's whisper threads into your thoughts, telling you that this door leads to the old mail storage room, a place that once held letters filled with hope, love, disappointment, longing, all the quiet pieces of life people entrusted to the postal workers who sorted them nightly under lantern light. She tells you that on that long ago Christmas Eve, the Meriwethers gathered here before their caroling began, and Eleanor waited by this very door for a letter that never arrived. You lean closer, breathing slowly, your body relaxed and heavy, your heartbeat steady as the glow presses near the door, seeping through its cracks like moonlight searching for a path. And then Faintly, you hear IT paper rustling from somewhere behind the wood, soft but unmistakable, as if someone unseen is unfolding a letter that has waited over 100 years to be read. The melody returns again, fuller now, carrying not just longing but a kind of resolve. And Evelyn murmurs gently that the past is beginning to open, that the story Eleanor left unfinished is stirring awake. Snowflakes drift overhead, catching what little light remains, and the alley seems to breathe, the walls exhaling a sigh of ancient winter. The glow floats closer to the door, brightening, urging you to witness what comes next, to listen without fear. As Evelyn's voice grows, softer still, a warmth begins to bloom behind the door, warm enough to feel even through the cold wood, warm like a lantern being lit after years of darkness. Unsettle you that the truth of the last carol is waiting on the other side. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The warmth behind the old wooden door grows just a little stronger, blooming like a hidden ember, remembering how to glow after years of patient darkness. And Evelyn's whisper glides through the cold air, steady and soft, guiding you deeper into the moment, as though she herself is standing just behind your shoulder, one hand lightly resting against your back to reassure you that nothing here wishes to frighten you. Everything in this forgotten corner of Willow Street only longs to be heard, understood, and gently brought into the quiet light of memory once more. The glow at your side pulses faintly, shimmering like a snowflake held in suspension, and then it drifts forward, settling against the door's crack, as if listening for a heartbeat. The alley holds its breath with it, the chill pausing, the night pausing, even your own thoughts softening into a peaceful hush. Then, from behind the door, comes a hesitant crinkle of paper unfolding, followed by the faintest brush of a fingertip gliding across its surface, as though someone within is rereading a letter that never found its way home. Evelyn's voice deepens, warm and sorrowful, telling you that the room beyond this door was once filled with unsent letters. Every winter, envelopes marked with names of soldiers stationed far from home, of widows waiting for news they feared, of children writing clumsy notes to toy companies asking for miracles. And somewhere among them had been one letter addressed to Eleanor Merriweather, a letter she waited for until her breath shivered, lantern dimming in her hands, as the carolers gathered behind her, trying not to disturb her quiet vigil. The glow flickers again, brighter this time, and you feel a gentle pull, urging you not to open the door with your hands but to lean closer, simply listening, being present. And as you let your breath slope, chest rising and falling as though in rhythm with the pulse of the alley itself, the door creaks not outward, not inward, but in memory, opening only in the way old stories open, like a curtain stirring just enough to let you glimpse the light behind it. A shape forms in your mind, not a figure, not a ghost, but a sense, a presence warm as candlelight Eleanor herself, standing in this room over a century ago, cheeks flushed from the cold, gloved hands clasping a lantern that flickered nervously in the draught. She leaned against a wooden crate where letters were sorted by hand, waiting for the carrier who had promised her a message, a promise, a truth she needed before stepping into the night to lead the final carol. Evelyn whispers that the letter never arrived because the man who wrote it, Samuel Witt, A quiet schoolteacher with gentle eyes and a heart far braver than he ever admitted, had given it to the wrong postman, a man overwhelmed with deliveries, who tucked it absent-mindedly into a sack meant for another route. The letter remained in storage for days, then weeks, then was forgotten, its ink slowly fading as time passed, its words waiting for a reader who would never arrive. But Eleanor didn't know this not that night. She only knew the cold bite of disappointment, the hollow ache of uncertainty, the feeling that something she needed to hear had been swallowed by the dark winter. The glow shifts, as though acknowledging the weight of that forgotten moment. And then the melody rises again, those three notes, trembling but growing steadier, as though the carol is trying to stitch itself back together from fragments scattered by time. You feel the notes stirring inside your chest, resonating with something quiet and human, something that understands what it means to wait for words that never arrive. Evelyn's whisper reassures you that listening is enough, that the past does not ask you to solve it or mend it, but only to bear witness. And as she speaks, a new sound emerges from behind the door, a light tapping, rhythmic and soft, like knuckles brushing gently against wood, not urgent, not fearful, just seeking acknowledgement. The warmth brightens, slipping through the cracks like a breath of lamplight, illuminating the snow at your feet with a faint golden glow. And for a moment, the alley seems to expand, the bricks around you softening into something warmer, the cold shifting into a gentler quiet. You sense that Eleanor is near, not in form, but in memory, standing as she once stood, lantern trembling in her gloved hands, breath misting the air, debating whether to call off the carol she had worked so hard to compose. She closed her eyes, then whispering a promise into the winter air that she would finish the carol someday, even if she had to do it alone. But the town never heard her voice again. The glow rises, sweeping gently across your vision, and Evelyn murmurs that the unfinished carol has been waiting not for closure, but for compassion, for someone to listen without turning away. The letter rustles once more, a softened echo of a story that almost vanished, and the warmth deepens, spreading like morning light beneath the door. And as the moment settles around you, still and sacred, Evelyn's whisper glides through the alley one more time, calm as snowfall, soft as breath as the story fades. Allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The warmth beneath the door grows softer again, not fading but settling, as though the hidden room has exhaled after holding its breath for more than a century. And Evelyn's velvety whisper glides back into the silence, weaving itself through the falling snow, reminding you that what you are feeling, this tenderness, this stirring in the quiet, is not fear, but recognition, a deep human understanding of longing that has stretched across winters long before your own. The glow rises gently, drifting away from the door, hovering at shoulder height like a lantern lifted by invisible hands, and as it moves, the faint notes of Eleanor Merriweather's unfinished carol pulse in the cold air. Not quite music, not quite memory, but something between the two, something that tugs softly at the threads of the night. Evelyn tells you that the carol was never meant to be grand. Eleanor had written it during the hardest year the town had seen in decades, a year marked by illness and loss, when many families on Willow Street lit their windows, not for celebration but in remembrance, hoping the warm flicker might guide their loved ones home through the veil of winter. Her song was meant to be a balm, a gentle promise that even the coldest seasons pass, that every dark stretch of the year carries within it the seed of light. And yet, because that letter never reached her hands, she never shared its final verse with the world. As you follow the glow deeper into the alley, the snow beneath your feet sinks to soften into a quieter hush, the crystals absorbing sound so completely that even your breath feels muted, as though the night is holding you with careful hands. The old bricks on either side lean inward slightly, making the passage feel narrower. Not in a frightening way, but in a way that suggests the space itself is guiding you closer to the place where the truth of the carol still lingers. Evelyn's whisper deepens, telling you that after the night Eleanor waited for the letter, she returned home with the lantern dimming at her side, her boots leaving faint impressions in the drifts, each step slower than the one before. The carolers who had gathered behind her exchanged worried glances, their own lanterns trembling in the wind, unsure whether they should continue without her or wait in the hope she might find her voice again. But she did not that winter, nor any winter after, and the town, already weary from sorrow, quietly let the tradition fade, preserving the memory of her beautiful songs, while avoiding the question that haunted them. Why had Eleanor fallen into silence? The glow leads you to a place where the alley widens just slightly, forming a small hollow sheltered from the wind. The snow here undisturbed, except for the faint shimmer that pulses across its surface. And as you step into the pocket of stillness, the three fragile notes of the carol return clearer, now, weaving a soft path around you like ribbons of sound. Evelyn murmurs that this hollow is where Eleanor once paused on her way home, her lantern trembling in her hands as she debated whether she should return to the carolers and pretend the missing letter didn't matter, whether she could sing the final verse, even without the words she had hoped Samuel would send. But the cold and the disappointment and the heaviness of unspoken truth settled over her shoulders until the weight became too much. She stopped here for a long time, long enough that the snow drifted around her boots, long enough for the wind to steal the heat from her fingers, long enough for the melody she carried to slip through the cracks of her resolve. The glow pulses brighter, illuminating the hollow with a soft, pearly light, and the air shifts gently, revealing a faint imprint on the snow, not a footprint, but the memory of one, a lingering shape that seems to shimmer at the edges as though caught between worlds, neither solid nor fading. You kneel slightly, breath deep and slow, and the imprint warms under the glow's radiance, revealing the outline of a lantern Eleanor's lantern left here for a moment too long. Evelyn whispers that when she finally resumed walking, Eleanor didn't realize she had dropped it. She carried on through the snow, unaware that her last source of light had fallen behind, unaware that she was moving further from warmth, further from resolve, further from the voice she had once trusted. By the time she reached her home on Willow Street, the chill had nested deep in her bones, and she was too weary to return for the lantern that had guided her through so many winter nights. She simply closed her door, letting the cold settle outside while she settled into the quiet, trying to compose the final verse without the words she had waited for. But the verse never came. The glow hovers over the lantern as a faint imprint, drawing light from the air, gathering it until the hollow is bathed in a warm, golden shimmer, and you sense a message rising from the snow, not spoken, not written, but felt. The carol was never finished because it wasn't meant to be sung alone. Evelyn's voice softens to a near breath, wrapping around the scene with the gentlest touch, telling you that sometimes the past clings not because of sorrow, but because of unfinished connection, because of love halted by accident, because of a letter that waited too long. And as the glow dims to its usual soft pulse, the snow settles again, peaceful and still, cradling the hollow in silence. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The light from the pendant burst outward in a soft, wavering glow, not harsh or blinding, but alive in a way that made the shadows around Clara tremble, as though they recognized it. Clara felt a hum rise through her ribs, a vibration that seemed to come from the air itself, from the earth beneath the layer of snow, from the stone slab that had waited silently for so many forgotten winters. Evelyn took a slow step forward, her voice low and steady, the kind of voice woven from dusk and wind. Clara, don't fight it. Let it show you what it needs to. Clara wanted to answer, to speak, to anchor herself to something familiar, but the world around her had begun to shift. The trees wavered at the edges of her vision, as if painted on drifting canvas, their outlines softening, bending, shimmering with a light that did not belong to the present moment. She blinked, but the scene didn't sharpen, it deepened. The snow beneath her feet warmed slightly, or perhaps it was her mind warming to something long lost. The clearing around her seemed to stretch, expanding in a slow ripple, and the ancient stone at the center pulsed faintly with the same rhythm as the pendant. Evelyn's fingers brushed briefly against Clara's arm, grounding her just enough to let the transformation continue without panic. "You're remembering," Evelyn whispered, "even if it doesn't look like memory yet." Clara felt it, a faint tug, like a thread tied to her heart being pulled from across time. She watched as the faintest outlines of figures appeared around the stone, barely silhouettes, their forms thin as mist, bending forward as though in prayer or sorrow. Clara held her breath. A memory, or something older than memory. The pendant warmed against her palm, and a low tone, something like a quiet bell struck somewhere beneath the earth, rang through her bones. The figures sharpened, not entirely human, not entirely spirit, but something caught between centuries, a gathering of people who once stood exactly here, under a different moon, under a different winter sky. Clara's voice cracked in her throat. "Evelyn, I know this place. I've been here before." "Not just once." Evelyn nodded, but there was something else behind her eyes. Recognition mixed with concern, as if she had expected this revelation, but not the weight of it. "Follow it," she murmured. "Let it open." Clara took a hesitant step toward the stone slab. As she moved, the air grew warmer still, the shimmering figures turning their heads slightly, as though acknowledging her arrival, as though they had waited for her across decades. Snowflakes hung suspended in the air, frozen mid-fall. Time itself seemed to be holding its breath. Clara reached out. Her fingers hovered above the cold, muscoved surface until suddenly she felt it. Not the stone, but a hand. Small, warm, familiar. she gasped. A child's hand. A girl's. Her own. The touch vanished instantly, but the memory it carried slammed into her with the force of a winter gust. She saw flushes unsteady, blurred by emotion of herself as a child standing in this clearing, barefoot in the snow, pendant glowing against her small chest, whispering something to the stone, something desperate, something she couldn't yet understand. Evelyn, Clara choked out. I've been here with someone. I wasn't alone. Evelyn's breath caught softly, barely audible, but enough for Clara to sense the shift. Then you're further than I expected, Evelyn whispered, almost as if to herself. Much further. The air trembled. The snow began to fall again, but the flakes moved upward, drifting toward the sky instead of down, each one dissolving into tiny motes of light. The figures around the stone dissolved with them, drawn upward like threads of memory, returning to the place where time no longer mattered. Clara's heartbeat thudded against the pendant, and for a moment she feared she might collapse from the sensation of remembering and forgetting at the same time. Then, a voice. The same voice she had heard before. Clearer now. Closer. Clara. Not a whisper. Not wind. A call. A plea. A summoning. Undo. Clara turned sharply toward the sound. Heart hammering. Snow spiraling around her like ghostly petals. Who are you? She cried softly. Why do you know my name? The forest answered, not with silence this time, but with a deep, resonant thrum, like the heartbeat of something ancient waking beneath the frozen ground. Evelyn stepped beside her, eyes fixed on the darkness between the trees. Clara, she said, her voice steady but her breath trembling. You're not remembering a place. You're remembering a promise. The pendant glowed brighter. The voice called her name again, and for the first time, Clara wasn't afraid, only drawn forward, The glow of the pendant pulsed gently against Clara's chest, warm and insistent, as though it carried not just light but understanding, a quiet map through memories, long forgotten. The voice that had called her name grew steady, not loud, not demanding, but patient, guiding her through the shadows of the clearing, through the remnants of snow-dusted branches that arched overhead like cathedral ribs. Evelyn remained close, her whisper low and comforting, threading through the cold air. This is it, Clara. The moment you've been circling in your dreams, the place your memories have always wanted you to find. Clara stepped forward, each footfall soft in the thickening snow, feeling the weight of centuries pressing gently around her as the figures she had glimpsed earlier shimmered faintly in the periphery of her vision, their presence no longer threatening but protective, guardians of a memory that refused to fade. She reached the center of the clearing again, the stone slab beneath her hands cold, rough, yet humming with energy that seemed to synchronize with her own heartbeat. The pendant brightened, casting shadows that danced over the snow like living threads, and for a moment Clara closed her eyes, letting herself sink fully into the sensation of being both here and elsewhere, present and remembered. A breeze stirred, carrying with it the faintest scent of pine and old letters, the smell of winters long past. and then just as suddenly as it arrived it vanished, leaving only the quiet hum of memory. Evelyn whispered, "Do you feel it? The promise that never ended." Clara nodded, the pieces of her recollection aligning, forming a story she had once lived but could never articulate. The voice returned, now clear as a bell through the winter night, speaking words she somehow understood even without hearing them fully. A call of welcome, a release, a reassurance that the lost carol, the abandoned promise, the unfinished melody of Eleanor Merriweather's song had waited for someone to honor it, to carry its echo forward. And now she was that someone. Snow swirled around her, luminous under the pendant's glow, forming spirals that lifted from the ground and slowly drifted skyward. Each flake like a note of the final carol, a piece of a song that had been paused but never broken. Clara's chest lifted and fell in steady rhythm, her mind calm, her heart attuned to the quiet magic that pulsed through the clearing. She knew, suddenly, that the song had never truly ended. It had merely awaited a listener, willing to carry its memory. Evelyn's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, grounding her in the moment, as though to remind her that even amidst spectral echoes, even amidst memories suspended between time, she was not alone. "Clara," Evelyn whispered, "the past has let you in. Now, you must let it go." The snowflakes around them drifted upward, the figures dissolving into strands of light that merged seamlessly with the night sky, leaving only the clearing, the stone, and the glowing pendant in Clara's hand, steady, warm, alive. Clara lowered the pendant slowly, feeling the release of the tension that had coiled inside her for years. The sense of loss softened by understanding, by connection, by the gentle realization that the unfinished song, the forgotten promise, had always been a part of her, waiting for the right moment to awaken fully. Evelyn's voice, soft to a near whisper, blending with the wind as the echoes fade. Remember that even what is lost can be found, and even silence carries its own story. Clara exhaled slowly, letting the stillness wash over her like a gentle tide, her eyes reflecting the pale moonlight as she realized the clearing, the forest, and the pendant had become more than memory. They were a bridge between the past and the present, between what had been and what could now be remembered. The snow settled again around them, undisturbed, a blanket of quiet peace. Evelyn straightened. Ergase Warmen spoke once more. "If you have felt the song, the memory, the quiet magic tonight, remember to carry it with you. And if you wish to hear more stories that touch the corners of memory and the heart, support us at Midnight Murmurs Radio. Subscribe, share, and let these whispers guide you through many more nights." Clara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips as the pendant's glow dimmed to its usual soft pulse. And together they turned toward the edge of the forest, footsteps light in the snow, leaving behind the clearing that had waited for her so long, knowing the story had found its conclusion, not a loud one, not a frantic one, but quiet, enduring, and complete. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep.